does some sort of a thing on his property there. He has enough to handle that, and there'll be maybe 10 or 20 cars parked out there. So there's a pretty good sized group. And I said to him when I was over there, when I first met him, I said, "You have every toy known to man, don't you?" Because he had a lot of stuff. But he smiled. I don't think he is at all offended by that. I didn't mean it as an offense. So, but he has. Now, what his spiritual life is, I have no idea. And I've only been a neighbor there for 18 years now. But I really don't know. Good people, but I don't know what they do. It's sad in today's society that we move around so well that our very neighbors, our close neighbor, we know them, but we don't associate with them. Back when it was horse and buggy days, I was just thinking this morning that if I went to see my daughter, it would take a half a day, because a horse would go about 20 miles a day at a good jaunt. Now that would have been a good day's travel. So if she lives 5 miles away, so 5 miles there and 5 miles back would be a day or a half a day just to go visit my daughter. Now, of course, we don't have that problem today. We don't have to go walk to the neighbors. I know of many of my neighbors, but it's sad. It's sad, and that's not what this is about. But it's about somebody who measures his life by what he possesses. And you and I cannot do that. The Lord's telling us not to do that. You don't measure your life by the abundance of your possessions. And we're going to see, of course, that our job is to seek His kingdom. To seek His kingdom, no matter what your possession. Now, I need to say that there is no evil in having the possessions. There is no evil. It doesn't say that. Show me where it says it's evil to have any of those possessions. He just says that life does not consist in the abundance of your possessions. But having possessions of itself is not evil. What is evil, and we'll continue to get in it as we go, is not seeking God's kingdom. So he told him this parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." It's all about him. But what was wrong with this guy? There's nothing in here mentioned that's wrong with him. He was a rich man. Nothing wrong with being rich. David, man after God's own heart, was rich. He had tons of gold, literally tons of gold. So being rich is not necessarily bad. This man owned property. Now you can pick almost any of the... Abraham probably didn't have much property, but he bought some just to bury him and his wife on. But they wandered around. There wasn't any ownership of property at that time. But you can pick Solomon. He had a fantastic amount of property and all that good stuff. So there's nothing wrong with owning property. He said, the ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. Now, Greg's in there teaching Sunday school right now, but I know when he has a good crop, and I understand this year he does, how did that happen? He worked for it. It's hard work being a farmer. It's hard work, and you are busy all the time. You have to be smart. Most of us think of a farmer as dumb farmer, but it's absolutely opposite than that. You have to know so much about so many different things to be successful, and Greg and his brother are certainly successful farmers. But he produced a good crop. So that means, in my mind, that he was a hard worker. He was not only a hard worker, but he was smart. He knew when to plant, what to plant, how to plant it, all that, so he would have a good crop. It didn't just happen, and it's not suggesting it did. So he was a hard worker. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Now, is there anything wrong with planning ahead? Anything wrong with planning ahead? Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns." Apparently he had some barns, but they weren't big enough to hold this all of this. So I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, I have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Now, is there anybody in here that's retired, or anybody in here that someday would like to be retired, that hasn't thought those same thoughts? Any of you? I know I did. I want to save up and get a good retirement, and then I can eat, drink, and be merry. I won't have any responsibility. I can just do what I want. You're going to find out that that's not what God has in mind. God does not have that in mind. Every one of us. Don't tell me you haven't, because I talk to a lot of people, and they're looking forward to retirement. And many people think they will buy, say, a motorhome and just go around the country looking at everything going. And I've even thought, well, wouldn't that be fun? And I got to thinking, I wouldn't want to be away from my family that much. But it's up to you. But he is suggesting something, I think, at least in our society, that we've all thought to do. Plenty of good things stored up. We take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? Once you have, and you don't know when God's going to require your life, it's going to happen. I can tell you, you're going to die. You're going to be dead someday. Stretched out in front of everybody, and everybody marched by with tears or without or whatever. You're going to be dead someday. We don't like to think of that, but we are. Then what happens to all those things that you thought were so important? All the time you spent, there's certainly plenty of illustrations of families who have basically, in many cases, been abandoned or ignored while they're earning a good living. And it's certainly not an unusual thought to think that as long as I'm providing well for my family, I'm doing my job. Nothing wrong with providing well for your family, but that's not doing your job. Your job is to, for relationships, if you will. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? And I would guess a month down the road, whoever inherited that would be saying the same thing. I will store all this grain, and I will say to myself, you have plenty of goods. We tend to think, man, if we just win the lottery, everything would be all set. And many of us play the lottery with that idea in mind. And said, well, it's not much money. Well, give it to the church. Maybe they can use it for some good. Just a thought. By the way, for those of you who don't know, we don't have any financial problems. So anytime I mention money, it's not because we need any. Not that I think what amounts to, we have a box in the back that you can put your offerings, and I think it's important to you. And it's going to say so in here. It's important to you to be generous with your money and to recognize your God. So I'm not saying we don't need money. We certainly need to pay our bills and so forth, but we don't have a problem with finances. So when I say that, it's not because I'm trying to dig up a few more dollars. I am suggesting that you need to be generous with your God. You need to be seeking His kingdom. You need to be recognizing that He is the one that's important, not all those other things, because you don't want to be. You fool. When we recognize that we all have thoughts in that area. This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God. That's an interesting way of putting it. Not rich toward God.